We've been talking a lot about theology, what it is, what the goals are, is it necessary and all of that. Now what we got to do, and this is going to be a little heady. This is always part of the class where it depending on what time during the day I teach the class, you can start to see people, their eyes roll back in their head because this starts to become a little bit more struggle intellectually to understand. There's a lot of stuff here this becomes more philosophical in some ways, but please bear with me here. Listen, pause for a moment, drink some coffee, do whatever you got to do. Drink a Mountain Dew, and Mountain Dews are good. I'm from Kentucky. We love Mountain Dew. So, but get yourself caffeinated, whatever you need to do to pay attention here, because this is such an important thing for us to get in the study of theology. Is theology possible? Is it possible? The possibility for theology. Is it possible? I mean, there's people that would say there's no way you can do theology because you can't know God. In fact, it's not even possible to do theology because there isn't a God. Okay, well, so what would we have to have? Like what would be the things that we could all agree, even if you're an atheist or an agnostic? I mean, that you could go, okay, you know what? Theology would be possible if these things were in order. And we need to look at that because we Christians do believe that the possibility for theology is there, but there's some things that have to be there for us to be able to genuinely do theology. The first one, and again, I apologize because some of you all are going to go, whoa, these are some big words, and I'm going to make sense out of it. Just struggle with me. This is why theology classes are sometimes difficult. This is why I love teaching these classes, though, because I really try hard to break it down so that it's understandable. I want you to understand. I want you to love theology. I want you to love the study of God, not just so that you can tell people where they're wrong, but so that you can have a great relationship with God. So what needs to be there for theology to be possible? Well, first of all, there needs to be the objective existence. I know I've lost some of you right there. I'm going to go back and explain this, I promise. The objective existence of the entity, the objective existence of the entity with which the science deals, the objective existence of the entity with which the science deals, namely God. In other words, if God doesn't exist, there's no possibility for theology. You can't really study God. You could just say, well, my study about God is he doesn't exist. And that's it. We're done. Still a theologian because we said something about God, but that's it. There's nothing else to say because God doesn't exist. Okay, so there cannot be the possibility for theology if there is not the objective existence. In other words, if God doesn't exist, we're done. And we got to talk about that. How do we know that God exists? Are there rational reasons to believe that God exists? Is there a reason as our servant but never our master? Is there a way that our reason can sort of serve us up to go, you know what? Belief in God is not irrational. Like there's some rational reasons to believe in God. And we have to talk about that because Systematic Theology 1, God, creation, salvation. We got to talk about God. That's what we're doing right now. Let's talk a little about theology. Now we got to talk about God. Okay, does he exist? If the objective existence of the entity with which the science deals, namely God, doesn't exist, then there is no possibility for theology. But we believe that he does. And we're going to come back and talk about why we think that it's reasonable to conclude that God exists. But if he doesn't exist, there's no possibility. So there has to be the objective existence of the entity with which the science deals, namely God. Let's go to number 2 for the possibility of theology. Second reason that makes theology possible. There must exist the subjective capacity, there must exist the subjective capacity of the human mind and spirit. There must exist. In other words, for theology to be possible, God's got to exist. It's got to be the objective existence of the entity with which the science deals, namely God. But for theology to be possible, there must exist the subjective capacity of the human mind and spirit, listen, to know that object. So in other words, let's assume that God exists. Let's say that we could prove that God exists. But we go, well, he's unknowable. There's no way to know him. There's no way to have direct communication with him. So we really can't do theology. Even if point one is correct, we wouldn't be able to do theology if there is not the subjective capacity that exists. It has to exist. We have to be able to have the subjective capacity of our human minds and spirits to actually know that object. Do we have those resources? Is that something that exists? Okay, we're going to come back to this because this is where we talk about revelation, not the end of the book of the Bible revelation, but God speaking to you and me. Like, we Christians believe God exists, but we also believe that there is the existence of the subjective capacity of the human mind and spirit to know that God. Like, we believe that that is a possibility. In other words, theology is not possible if these things are not there. And we'll have to come back and talk about these more in depth. But there has to be the objective existence of the entity with which the science deals, namely God. There must exist the subjective capacity of the human mind and spirit to know that object. And third, and this is important, third, there must exist has to exist, definite means there must exist definite means by which, this is important, there must exist definite means by which the object can be brought in contact. So, what's the possibility for theology? Well, the objective existence of the entity with which the science deals, namely God. There must exist the subjective capacity of the human mind and spirit to know that object. Third, there must exist definite means by which the object can be brought into contact with that capacity to know. This is huge. So we cannot do theology if there's not the objective existence of God. You have to have, the object has to exist. You can't talk about anything that doesn't exist. Secondly, there has to be the subjective capacity in the human mind and spirit to know that object. In other words, do we have the ability to know that object? And third, there must exist definite means by which the object can be brought into contact with that capacity to know. In other words, if there's no way for us to really know about God, we can't know about him. And if we don't have the ability within the human mind and spirit to know God, we can't do that. And if he doesn't exist, we can't do that. So these things must exist for the possibility of theology. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take all of these three and we're going to break them down into really concise detail so that we can walk away and know, okay, I understand when you told me the objective existence of the entity with which the science deals, namely God, I sort of get that idea, but I don't even know if God exists. In fact, I'm a Christian and yeah, I think he exists. But are there arguments? Are there things that people have, yes, we're going to talk about that. There must exist the subjective capacity of the human mind and spirit to know that. Do we have endowments? Have we been granted the subjective capacity to know God? And then what is revelation? Has God spoken to you and me? And we're going to look at those things coming up.